Hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my name's Daniel Lynn. I'm a been coach and trainer at Agile 42 for some years now, and as Sherry mentioned, right, on the U.S. side of Agile 42, we're a multinational company at this point, so it's yeah. So I have my little corner that I enjoy working in, um, and I came from I got introduced to Agile as a team member, right? As an engineer, I was mostly writing software that automated the deployment, um, configuration, and management of hardware inside of data centers, right? And it was pretty cool. My first experience diving into Scrum, um, we ended up building that company's flagship product kind of by accident. One of our VPs set us a goal, kind of like a North Star, and said, "All right, we trust you. Start building towards it." And we used Scrum to make incremental steps towards that goal, and that product that we built ended up kind of taking over the company. I think nowadays they call it cloud computing. You may have heard stuff like that before. Back then, it went by grid computing or virtualization, or all the same things it still is. I don't want to overstate that. Like, I didn't invent cloud computing. I was on a team that built one of the early products that was in that space. So anyway, it really kind of stuck with me, and then that led me to doing more of this. And so one of the things that's always stuck with me, no matter how far up in an organization I work, is that ultimately, sooner or later, someone has to build a thing, right? I can't create value by building backlogs. I can't create value by creating org charts. I create value by building products. And so the organizations that have the most success with Agile are the ones that find ways to make great environments for teams to build products in, right? That's ultimately the goal of all of this stuff, is how do I create an environment where teams can easily apply their skill into creating valuable products. So that's kind of what I want to dig into a little bit today. I'm going to share my screen if I can. Um, our first technical hurdle of the night. And with any luck, you'll see a Chrome window that says meaningful metrics telling stories.
Looks good. Um,
Awesome.
I don't think it's presenting, so we see your thumbnails on the left as well.
I'm sorry, it is. Oh, correct. Okay. Yep, I'm just going to stay on this view. I'm not going to mess with the.
That's good.
All right. So I already kind of said who I was. We'll skip over that. Yeah, I think mostly I'm happy to share these slides out later, right? And all this information later. I'm going to use mostly these slides, and then a big part of this is an activity, and that'll be inside of Miro, and you have access to all of that stuff. Happy to share it around. Oh, and this is, sorry, I'm like copied an old thing. Should I have them send a message directly to Catherine or Sherry if they have questions? Is that fair as we're going?
Absolutely. We can help get visibility into that. Would you like to take questions throughout and be stopped, or?
Yeah, we're gonna end up so it's gonna build. And so if you have a question, I've lost anyone or anything, please feel free to interrupt. And if we're getting so far behind schedule with questions, then we'll table stuff for later.
Yeah. So I think either Catherine or myself are happy to moderate. Do we want to just make a decision, Catherine or myself, to moderate, and everybody knows how to direct message people, or do you just want to put it into the chat for everybody to see?
Yeah, Sherry, do you want to moderate?
I certainly can. My request would be, if I moderate, just keep on streaming the questions to me. I have found that when we come to the Q&A section and people start slamming questions, they get concerned because their question doesn't get presented. So I need enough time as a moderator to be able to kind of prep it. So please feel free to share things throughout the presentation, so that when we get to that Q&A moment, then I'm more prepped and I can have it prepared to present.
if there's something that's topical for that moment, hey, I don't understand that thing that's up on the slide, feel free just to, right, no problem.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so what's in store for tonight? I have a couple things that I want to talk through, but what I'd like to do to help you out is let's talk about what makes metrics useful, and I don't want to dwell too much on like definitions and things, but it's worth pausing for when we talk about metrics and we talk about measurement. And it does matter, right? It's like what makes a metric useful is that it's first off a metric. That's good, right? And then it's useful. And so we'll talk through what does that mean, and then I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about really common metrics in Agile teams. So once we talk about useful metrics, let's talk about, well, what are things that people commonly find useful? And you may see some of these that you see all the time. You may see some that you see all the time that are not used in a useful way at all. And maybe we can talk about how to make them useful. And you may see some new ones. And then there's a couple peppered in there that are very context specific. And then what I want to do is this gets to the activity that Sherry mentioned that I did the last time we did this, is I'm actually going to give you a big bunch of sample data, right? Because again, as the title of this presentation said, it's about telling stories. So I'm going to ask you to start telling some stories, right? Now, I'm going to put this out there. I want to give people an option. I know the last time we did this in person, I said, hey, we're going to make skits and you're going to perform skits in front of people that tell these stories about these metrics. And I scared a few people off. So I'm going to give you an out. I do encourage people, like, do a skit. It's a more fun way to tell the story. But I don't want anyone to leave because they don't want to do a skit. So you can join a group to help build a skit and then not necessarily be one of them performing. You can also just tell a story through the metric. So I'm just going to put that in there right from the beginning so no one gets scared away throughout this presentation. I think that's enough table of contents. Let's dive in. So these are useful metrics. Why don't you see them on Agile teams? Feel free to yell anything out. It's fine. We can.
Speed limit does not apply.
Yeah, why not?
That's for traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about the others?
Global temperature differences?
Yeah, that's a really important metric.
It's unlikely that my team works so hard that they affect the global temperature.
Yeah. Okay, the third one might be a little bit more applicable to a team depending on your exact circumstances. But probably not, right? We're not going to show this in a sprint review.
Is that like heart monitor or blood pressure or something?
Oh, no, it's just an internal temperature, like a thermostat.
Thermostat, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So here's the thing. This may seem silly to put it up, but it feels like it's the first conversation that we always have to have when we're talking about metrics. People say, well, what metrics should we track with a team? I don't know. What do you want to know? Right? If I want to know trends in global temperature, that's a good metric. If I want to know if the temperature inside of a building at a particular point in time fits within certain norms that we have for that building, that's a good, well, part of that's just a measurement. We'll get into that in a second, but that's a good metric, right? Average speed on roads is a good metric, but it's only good for the thing that you want to learn about. So this is the very, very first thing. Anytime we have a conversation with metrics, if we don't start a conversation with metrics with the question, what do you want to learn? You're not going to have a productive conversation about metrics. Right? So I know that sounds like, well, duh, of course, but I don't know that I've ever had a conversation about metrics start that way. I don't know that anytime anyone's come to me and said, hey, I'd like to talk about metrics, that someone's actually said, so here's what I want to learn. So it may seem like common sense, but it's not particularly common. So I just really want to stress that first. Next, what's a metric versus a measurement, right? So there are a lot of definitions out there, and it can be discipline specific, but I tried to generalize them here. A measurement is one specific instance. I measure something, right? I could measure my laptop and the screen would be 13 inches long diagonally, right? I could measure the temperature right now, right? But a measurement is one specific instance, and a metric it can be one measurement, but typically it's a number of measurements looked at in aggregate applied to a specific purpose, right? So again, if I go back and I look at my global temperature difference, there are tons of measurements in there, right? And I'm applying it to the purpose of maybe seeing trends in growth in global temperature differences, right? There's an inferred metric inside of my thermostat because that's one measurement, but I can look at measurements throughout a long period of time, right? So, oh yeah, definitely. I see about in the car listening. So yeah, we'll get you the slides later as well. So this is really important because again, I hear people talk about metrics and they say, well, what was their velocity this sprint? 35. Great, that's not a metric, that's a measurement, right? Getting back to what do I want to learn? Maybe I want to learn if our velocity is stable. I want to learn if it's increasing. I want to learn if it's fluctuating all over the place. Those are all valuable metrics in order to learn things, right? One measurement is not necessarily helpful. So again, it feels like this is basic, feels like it's simple, but it builds to the conversation you need to be having. If I want it to be a metric, I need to be looking at a bunch of information so that I can see trends, I can see relationships, and I need to have a purpose, right? I need to be in the right context. What's the thing that I want to learn? I'm going to assume I have blown no one's mind yet, right? I'm just basing you down in stuff that we kind of all know, but maybe we don't pay attention enough to when we start to have these conversations about metrics. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's talk about some common metrics and what they're used for. And so I can just not talk at you constantly. What I'll do is we'll put it out there and I can ask people to call out, if I look at velocity and predictability.
My shoes are probably dry now. I put them outside. They were close, but they weren't all dry.
My yard's dry. So velocity and predictability. What do I want to learn out of this metric? What context do I use this in?
Can you ask the question or rephrase it?
Yeah, so up on the screen, right, we have an example of this is a chart. We have velocity and predictability. These are commonly used inside of teams. Right in here we see the blue section is actual delivered items, whereas the gray section is things that we committed to but did not deliver. So if we said, hey, I want to track this, what might I be trying to learn through tracking this?
How many story points per sprint the team can deliver? On average, about 40.
Yeah. What else?
For predictability, you might be trying to set expectations with stakeholders or people who have dependencies on you so that you can sync up with them.
Yeah. Yeah, so this particular chart tells an interesting story. What do you see? Someone tell me one thing you see in it?
Team loves to overcommit.
There's a lot of overcommitment in there. What else?
But on one particular sprint, they did meet exactly their goal.
They did?
The estimations.
Yeah.
There's little variability. They're pretty consistent on their delivery.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right on.
So this is where the story starts to come out, and this is what we want to. So this is what we want to try to draw, and I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this first one, just because this is probably something that many of us have seen over and over and over again. Velocity and predictability, these are not uncommon metrics to be tracking, but there's a lot of story in this, right? They're remarkably consistent in what they're delivering. Yet in recent sprints, they've committed to more and more and more, even though they're not delivering anymore, right? And that prompts some questions. Why is that happening? What's going on? What's the conversation that's happening behind it? So this is the thing that's really valuable when we do use metrics. What do I want to learn? I want to learn how consistent they are. I want to learn what the average velocity or average throughput of work is. But once I see it, it may prompt other questions that I want to learn, like why do they feel the need to keep committing higher and higher, right? If they're being consistent, tons of answers to that. Maybe they feel like, we're trying, like we want to see if maybe we push ourselves, maybe there's space for us to grow. Great. Or maybe there's a deadline coming up and we feel like we have to. Well, those are two very, very different stories, right? That require very different approaches to helping the team succeed. So I want the answers to those questions and know what story is coming out. Speaking of super, super common metrics, what are these guys? Burn down charts. What do we use these for?
To see what is produced across the time of the sprint and whether or not you delivered all of the work that you agreed to.
Yeah. So it kind of gives us a picture, right? Over time, how has work delivery occurred? And so I can learn, what happened in here? Where did, right? It can raise questions. It can maybe answer some questions. So, and for anyone who's not familiar, sorry, I meant to give a quick explanation of what these are as we go through, just for things that you might not be familiar with, right? In this case, I'm burning down like story points. I'm not a big fan of burning down hours. If your hours don't move linearly, we should have a different conversation. I'm very interested in your story, but my hours burn down about 24 per day. So burning down hours kind of gets weird, right? I understand like, I work this many versus this many versus this many. The question becomes, what are you trying to learn with that? And chances are what we're trying to learn could be better tracked other ways. Okay. This one's fairly self-explanatory. Not a lot of teams actually track this. Personal opinion, a lot more teams should. What do you think this is showing?
Testers probably got better in sprints 5 and 6.
Well, so escaped defects. So
Right.
left the sprint.
It got worse, yeah.
No, better. That's better testing. That could easily be better testing, couldn't it?
So I suppose it depends on how you're structured, right? So I was making the assumption that the testers are inside of the Scrum team. So these are things that no one caught and left, they got marked as done. So, but baddest, I'm making the assumption that's maybe invalid. So the question stands like, hey, what are those defects? Did they get past everything, or are those things that you found before they hit production? Yeah, potentially a building of technical debt there. I see Samantha wrote a note in the chat, right? Just how many things got it? Yeah, so really valuable thing to track is I might be producing a certain amount, but if what I'm producing is buggy, well, that's going to come back and create more work for me later on to create that technical debt.
So now the escape defects thing there was just a count, though, no indication of severity or relevance to the end user. So if these were in fact irrelevant to the end user, the team may just not care. it may not matter that something escaped. Someone said, oh, it's an issue, like not relevant to the user. Yes, it's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I see there's a thing in chat about maybe missed requirements tracked as a defect. So this is actually an awesome point to make, is that, and it's one of my objections to the idea of standard metrics, right? Standard metrics can act as a perfectly valid thing to start with, but you're all raising things that are really important. Well, do I care about all defects the same? Again, back to, what do I want to learn? Maybe if I want to learn how disruptive any technical data I'm creating is, I need different information than this. I need to know how many high priority defects or emergency defects go out. I need to know, so how many hours did it take to clean them up? Right. Really slide and back. Yeah. So, and then Bobby, this gets into, again, asking the team to tell the story. So what we're going to get into in the activity, once we're through some of these common metrics, is these only tell a really thin slice of the story. And that's generally true for any metric. They tell a really thin slice of the story. And what you're kind of coming up here, you're coming up with some hypotheses, but effectively what those are, questions to ask. So as we go through here, what we're going to find is we can look at metrics, and it's mostly going to prompt questions to ask the team, because that can get us to the story of what happened behind it. Once we have the story, then we can make meaningful improvement in teams, right? But we can't just from the metrics. The metrics just give us some information to start that learning process off. Yeah, I might have things like releases. How many releases to production am I doing? Right, again, context may make more sense for some teams, less sense for other teams. Even inside of one organization, you may have some teams that are making multiple releases out to production per sprint, and other teams that are doing 1 or 0, right? Again, may be helpful, may not be helpful, depends on your context, depends what you want to learn. Burn up charts. So this is one, I know that these were really, really common for a while. And I think over the past 2 or 3 years, they've sort of become less and less and less common. So a quick explanation, a burn up chart, you'll notice down at the bottom, it's tracking kind of iterations or sprints. And then story points. So it's kind of saying, hey, sprint over sprint, how much are we releasing, right? How much is potentially shippable? And then I have some line, the total amount of work for a feature, an MVP, a quarterly release, whatever that happens to be, some target I'm trying to get to. Maybe it's the release I want to make by Christmas. Right, and a burn up chart lets you make some probabilistic projections about how likely I am. Like this one says I'm going to come in, right? I'll probably finish somewhere between sprint 9 and sprint 14, right? And somewhere around sprint 11 is my most likely based on averages. So it allows us to forecast out likelihood to complete a larger body of work.
These are kind of radically flawed in our world, though, simply because we don't know the scope 30 weeks in advance. So that MVP line is going to go up, not parallel.
Yeah. Well, so that tells you an interesting story too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There was so another one of the Agile 42 coaches, I know when he does classes, he'll show a real burn-up chart from one of our clients where it did exactly what you're talking about. Like it was kind of going along until they realized all the stuff that they had to do, and it went pretty vertical. And it kept going vertical for quite a few sprints. And they were in a conversation that I'm sure most people who have done any project management are familiar with. Every time the stakeholders said, when will it be done? The answer was in 2 sprints. Because, and so they actually use that chart. Oh, what's the story? What story is it telling us? It's telling us that we are learning that we have new things we're supposed to do faster than we're getting them done. And that led them to the decision to go, okay, if we don't cap this somewhere, this is just going to grow forever, right? And so again, the metric led them to the conversation, which gave them the story that led them to an effective action to address the situation. Yeah, thank you for raising that. Okay, we're gonna get a little bit out of what you commonly see in Scrum. Let's give love to Kanban people. Cumulative flow diagrams. So these are kind of cool. What they show is where work is sitting at any point in time. And so when you see bulges in cumulative flow diagrams of certain colors, what you're seeing is a buildup of work, right? So one of the things I can see from this is that I have pretty good flow through my initial backlog and triage and working on it, but the validation stage isn't horrible, but it keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, right? So it's not completely stuck, but I'm outpacing that stage. So that tells it provides some really interesting information that can lead us to some more stories. Hey, what's happening there? Why does that keep going? Do I have a mismatch of skills on my team? Do I have a whole team who gets it to validation and then moves on to something else? And that poor validation team is just stuck trying to carry it over the finish line, right? A couple more I'll share with you, and then we'll get into some more activity. Lead time histograms. For anyone who doesn't know, right, lead time is how long from when I ask for something to when I get it. How long does that take, right? So a lead time histogram, what I'm seeing is on average how long different things take to be completed, right, over time. I threw in a couple just at the end just to point out. I want to stress again, different teams have different needs on what kind of metrics they track. So I threw in a couple at the end that are maybe more towards a call center. If I go into a call center, I don't so much care about velocity. I want to know things like my NPS. What is my NPS score with my customers? Am I making them happy in my call center? What are my ticket trends? What kinds of tickets am I getting through, right? And what do those look like? Are they growing or shrinking? Right. And what do my calls look like, right? So if I'm a call center, what does my call duration look like? So again, I put these last couple at the end just to stress what you need in your context depends on what you want to learn, right? So again, all of these, you're welcome to kind of click through and be like, oh, that was interesting. Why doesn't my team check that? Wouldn't it be nice if we knew how many defects we created? We don't really talk about that and we don't see it. Great. Then use that one. But the important thing is always, what does your team need to be able to improve its situation, right? And those are the metrics that you want to use. I know we don't have a lot of time in this meetup, so I went through a bunch of stuff really, really fast. And I want to pause there to see if I lost anyone before I ask you to do something with a whole bunch of metrics. Were there any questions about some of these? I guess
Or
one
maybe
other
anybody,
point, yeah,
go ahead, Daniel.
I was just gonna say one other point that I want to make is that it feels like, oh my God, that was a ton of stuff. Yeah, don't do that to your teams. Pick a little bit, and start with where you want to learn, right? Hey, are we predictable? Great, look at velocity and predictability. And if the answer is no, maybe address that and then move on to the next thing that you want to challenge. All right. So I'm going to
Well,
stop.
I would, Daniel, like to encourage people to share their own personal stories with metrics, because that's what we really want to get out of this is sort of how metrics can be interpreted. So I don't know if you want to maybe lead with that before we move into this activity, or maybe share something after the activity.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So does anyone have any particular great examples or horrible examples of how they've seen metrics used? Maybe we can share one or two before jumping into the activity.
I will share from my personal experience that you just have to caution on how you use metrics, because if you start misusing metrics, they become completely meaningless. So that's not really a story, but yeah, I just wanted to at least share that you just need to caution against some consistency and really understand like what you're trying to gain and learn from the metrics. How are you trying to grow? How are you trying to, improve is what we're really looking at. I've just been on some teams where they've, maybe changed some metrics so that it looks like they are in a better position than they may actually be, but in reality, maybe the value that they're delivering is not really quality, and that came but the metrics look good. So how do you create that quality in that output and creating that transparency?
My company, one of the things that we've been talking about is that quality or that value, and we've been thinking about it from the customer perspective. So rather than how many defects or how many points, it's more about what does that person that we're delivering this to see it as value. So we're actually foundation-wide shifting to a net promoter score as a way to kind of measure that. It's a challenge for us to think like that. We're used to, well, we know how many lines of code or bugs or whatever, but this is that perception of value. And I think it's where you get into the subjective piece and how do you tie that back to what I do each and every sprint. That's the hard part.
I wanted to ask, unfortunately, most of the tools that we have access to track the work and see the flow, like Rally, like ADO, like AHA, it's only as good as what's already been input. So percentage done is the one that really cripples a team. If you've got product owners or stakeholders that are going, okay, give me the percentage done. I need that number on this feature. And when are we going to deliver? But we're still iteratively exploring and researching and putting the backlog stories together. So I caution my stakeholders before I look at any metrics with them, but it's still it's a flaw of the tools, and I don't know how to game that. We've talked about creating placeholder stories with fake points just to game that percentage done.
So I will say on that point, this has been, so one of the wonderful things about all the tools and one of the horrible things about all the tools that have come out there, there's no tool that I'm not a fan of, honestly. Like, I know that certain ones like Jira take a lot of flack. I actually really like Jira. I think it's a good tool. But the blessing and curse with them is that they give us certain capabilities for reporting, for metrics, for visibility, but they also box us into those. So like one of those percentage done, I'm going to make some assumptions here that what they really want to know is how are we progressing and when are we likely to wrap that up and get to move on to the next thing or some variation of that. And the truth is that percentage done only tells you that if you know exactly what you have to do. And if that were true, you probably wouldn't be using Agile or Scrum anyway. So there's a flaw in the desire to have that but it's a valid need. So a burn-up chart is a much more effective way to answer that need. But if the tool doesn't have a good burn-up chart, then you can feel like you're boxed in. And sometimes the most important thing is knowing what you want to show. And then if the tool does it, great, use the tool, because that'll always be easier. But if the tool doesn't do it, don't show something that's less useful just because it's in the tool. Make the argument for, I'm going to show you a burn-up chart. You know what? I'm going to build it in Excel because this system doesn't do it. But that's going to give you the information that you need.
So I'd make a suggestion on that one. Is I've done really large scale projects where there are thousands and thousands of stories, and they're emerging as we go. So I did it, reported in Excel, and just calculated story growth compared to throughput. So I was still able to make a here's when you're going to get it prediction, but it was based on the idea of things are going to continue to grow for some time period, but we're going to use a trend line to figure out where they meet.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Nobody liked the answer, but it was accurate.
That is often true when we get into the deadlines. So, yeah. So there was a question that came through, and I'm going to hit it before as we get into the activity. I'm going to share my Miro screen. So there was a question about how do you read cumulative flow diagrams, and it's a pretty quick answer. All I'm doing, so these stack, right? So at a certain point in time, for example, on the 16th of January in 2019, right, I had, right, if this was, let's call that 9 items done, and then so 9 to 20, so about 11 items in validating, right, another maybe 2 items in working, another maybe 2 items in triage, and 4 in the backlog. So that's all I'm doing. I'm vertically kind of counting upward for each of these stacks, right? So at any given point in time, that's how much is in any particular status, right? Sorry, my son's doing impressions of animals downstairs. Let me go close the door.
On the cumulative flow diagram, I wonder, do you have any that have some bulges that you would be able to glean meaning from?
Tell you what, I'll kick off the activity, and before it's done, I'll have an example. How's that sound?
Cool, because I see this is a really great ideal state, or it's a pretty good one. Nice,
yeah, it's not bad. I mean, so the one thing that I would glean from this is that your validating is growing, not fast, but it's growing, right? And so that will eventually get out of hand. So there's definitely an existing bottleneck there. All right, so what I've got, I'm going to share with you a link to Miro. In fact, let me do that now. Copy board link, and where's Zoom chat?
It's down in the center, in the bottom.
Yep. Yeah, because I'm sharing, like it moves it around. All right, so I put a link in the chat, and that will take you to Miro. For the person who's listening on the phone, I apologize. That will not help you at all. This will also be available to people, right? You can go on, you can view this with the link. And what I have here is 5 different teams, right? And each of these teams, I provided just a quick, here's what they do. Here are some of their strengths, here are some of their challenges, and here's some metrics that they've been tracking about their work, right?
And just a question before, just about getting people in. It says, enter the password to open this board. Should they do that or enter anonymously and sign in? The other option is you're entering anonymously, sign up to Miro.
No, give me 1 second. I didn't want it to have a password. If you hit the link now, does it let you in?
Someone say if you get there before I do.
It looks like people are getting in now. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you only have view access, not edit access, so no real harm in people being able to get to it. So here's the activity that I'd like you to do. Is we're gonna go out to breakout rooms in a few minutes, and we're just gonna do some randomly assigned breakout rooms. What do you want to say, like 6 or 7? I think that sounds reasonable. That should put 8 to 10 people in each room. If a few people can't jump in, they can at least be part of the conversation. And then it's still enough people that if you want to do a skit, you can.
Would you like for me to make you a host? Or
sure, that's fine too.
Okay, or 7 random, I can take a stab at 7 random breakouts.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So you're going to get put into a breakout room, and you're going to have about 12 minutes. I'm going to put up a timer. You'll see it at the bottom of the Miro board, right? And in that 12 minutes, here's what I would love for the groups to do is to look through, right? You can look at all the teams, but I want you to pick one team. Now these teams don't exist in isolation. When we do this as a larger workshop, there are trends that you can see across teams. So don't feel like you can only look at one, but I want you to focus on one team and see what kind of stories you can tell from the metrics. And here's where you get to be creative. Imagine you are that team, all right? So you can tell a story. Oh, this is what happened. This is why this is occurring. This is the only ask of you is that your story is consistent with what the data shows, right? And again, feel free to look across teams a little bit if you want to try and use some context and work some of that into your story. That's perfectly okay. So when you come out of that 12 minutes, what I would like from each group is to say, oh, we are team Saturn. And, what you can see is that, we've really tried to commit to more as this has gone on. Here's why that's happened. Here's our successes and our failures with it. Here's what we plan to do in the future, right? If you want to take it one step further and do a skit, correct. Not all teams have the same metric charts, right? Some are tracking some data, some have missing data. You'll notice we have a Kanban team over here. I think that was an infrastructure team, if I remember correctly. It's an operations fulfillment team and a call center. So you can kind of tell a lot of different stories. If you want to take it one step further and have some fun with it, here's what we did. Here's what we did in the in-person workshop is build a skit. And a great way to build a skit, a great format, is to juxtapose good interaction with the metrics and bad interaction with the metrics. That can involve bringing other stakeholders. Maybe someone can play a VP who wants to know what the heck's going on. You could play good Scrum Master, bad Scrum Master. You can have some fun with it. So the next 12 minutes will be all yours. Like I said, either be the team and tell a story about what's been happening that's backed up by that data, or take it a step further and turn it into a skit where you show maybe some good and bad interactions with the metrics. Fair enough? Any questions, any requests? No, you're gonna pick whatever team. So in your group, your first action will be to decide which, as you look over at which team do you want to focus on. Yeah.
So Daniel, it's okay,
it's okay
if there's two Saturn groups.
Sorry?
It's okay if there's two Saturn groups
Yeah,
presenting.
absolutely. Because you're using some creativity, you're going to invent different stories, and that's part of it too, right? It proves that the metrics don't have the full story in it.
Okay.
right.
When are you, say go when you're ready, Daniel.
Ready when you are.
Okay. It says all participants have been invited. I guess I didn't push folks.
Yeah, I saw
Please
my invite,
accept.
so you're good.
Made
And
you
I'll pop around the rooms, so.
okay. Hopefully I made you a co-host so that you can pop in, but let me know. All right, so I guess I didn't force folks. So if you see it pop up, please accept and go to your room.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's a meetup, right? So I'm sure there are a few people who
That's
have to
true.
wait to grab some food or something, and they're gonna come back on what's going on.
Yeah, I use WebEx, so every time I feel like I get to know Zoom all over again, and so yeah.
Oh man. All right. There was a big thing in chat, and I didn't get to read it. Was it CX? Yeah. Oh, it was someone heading out. Okay, well, that's a shame, but all right. And my thought, I'm just going to give, oh, shoot, I should have started that timer. All right.
You need to shade
And
off. There we go.
so my thought on timing, and we'll get the logistics out of the way real quick, was, we'll give them the time to do this, and then we'll go through as many teams as we go through. Did you need to? Do you have end of meetup updates that you need to hit, or do we have until about 7:30?
Yeah, I think we could go till 7:30. I can double check with Sherry if she has anything she wants to bring up at the end, but we front loaded a lot of stuff. So I think you could go till 7:30 if you'd like.
Okay.
We do notice folks start drop off after 60 minutes, but we'll see.
Yeah. And I tried to leave some padding so that, people don't.
Nice.
It's someone's evening,
Yeah, Zoom life is quite different. Yeah, so do you want to jump in and
Yeah, I'm gonna start jumping around some of them. And
oh gosh, let's see. Breakout. Here we go.
All right, so David, I gotta tell you, we kept our stories strictly professional.
Oh, where's the fun of that?
Yeah, I do think breakout rooms, nothing is recorded from those sessions. I think it's just a break. So for those coming back, it starts recording now. End of splice.
When we did this last time, Teddy Carroll, right? He was one of the Scrum Masters over at Scrum Alliance. He was there, and he was like the bad vice president who was yelling at the team about their metrics. And I never want that man to be mad at me about anything. It was terrifying.
Yeah, I thought that would be fun, but I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do it because I don't know the context. But it'd be fun.
That was, yeah. He's a wonderfully nice person, and in day-to-day life, but he plays the angry executive very well.
Yes,
So,
but it was extremely entertaining.
It absolutely was.
It was very realistic.
Yeah, he interrupted a presentation, yelling at them. I went to work and I can read a bar graph. So anyway, yeah. So can people, as we go through the groups, can people share their screens, or is it locked onto who can share their screen?
I think we should just have someone like Catherine maybe share the screen and she can navigate for the group. I think it might be easiest. Otherwise, switching back and forth might be a little tedious.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder what the view version that we have, if it looks like I can't. I usually like to follow people so they can present, but we'll see. Unless Daniel, would you like to share?
Sure.
Yeah, we could do that.
All right. So let's do this inside of chat. We'll form a queue with the letter Q. If you would like for your group to share, just put a Q in the chat, and then we'll just go in order of which people respond first.
I'm just gonna, Meru, do you want to say our team Mars?
You mean me? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw that in there. I hope that.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So should I start?
I'll scroll us over to Mars on the screen.
Yeah.
Oh, and Daniel, if you find them in the little circle above, if he's logged in, I just think not everyone's logged in too. But there we go. Now Maru can drive.
Yeah, there you go. Good call.
All right, I'm not on Miro, so I'm looking at the Zoom now.
Okay.
So I can tell you the story from my side.
Okay.
So I'm the QA guy in that team, and in that team, I keep getting really late real definition of the work that people are working on. So I cannot write my tests properly. I write them very, very last, and I'm always writing tests 2-3 sprints behind, and that's why I keep getting escaped defects. And in fact, these are just macro escape defects. There is a lot more defects behind them because we only put one number per user story, but per escape defect there, I probably have several ones that that are hiding behind that bar. And also, these are only the ones that the client discovered, not that we discovered through our testing. So that bar chart means nothing, actually. It's way worse than that.
Well, this is Mark. I'm the developer on the team, and when you look at Sprint 4, we had a full committed load that we needed to hit, but I had 2 new employees that showed up that didn't know anything about development work, and so I had to spend most of my time trying to get them up to speed, but we were still expected to hit the same targets. And yes, we had a lot more defects then, but if you look at Sprint 5, our defects got a lot better, and we were still targeted with a very large commit load. And they're finally, as we're getting to Sprint 6, they're finally learning, how to actually code and how to actually work on the project.
The next one is Jubin Gosar.
Yeah, I just queued up my team. So Rob, you want to help out, please?
Well, so before you do, real quick round of maybe quiet applause or thank you. That was completely unrealistic. No team ever has those problems. I don't know what you're talking about. It's but I do want to, jokes aside, I want to spotlight, like, that's really, it gets to the point, right? You can tell a story with the metrics, and a lot of times that story gives you so much more information about what's really happening on there and what should I be expecting next. And do we need an intervention, right? That QA thing about defects, oh my God, it's way worse than it is. Hopefully that would spark another conversation about, do I need to know exactly how much worse? Is it proportional? Is there action to be taken then? What do we want to do about it? So thank you very much.
Or do we need more QAs or testers on the team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe some better dev practices.
Or
Yes.
early testing, yeah. Better QA, yeah.
Yep, pairing with the devs. Yep.
Yeah. So Juvian, which team are you?
You're Saturn, and Rob, will you be sharing or me to?
I'll just go off of what you've got here. So we at Team Saturn, we had a couple of really good sprints. We thought we were doing amazing. And then something happened. And in about sprint 4, you can see the little blip on our burn down. And we think what actually happened at this point, and we're speaking anecdotally here, that is where we got caught by either we had a large customer that had a new feature promised for an already set release date, or perhaps there was some governmental regulations that kicked in and changed what it was we were trying to get done. In any case, we're basically dealing with most likely a hard, fast date, and we have a scope creep or scope change. And if you look at the chart at the top, we can actually see our output looks pretty consistent when we look at the blue bars. Our team seems to be rocking it. It's the extra work that's showing up in sprint 5 and 6. As we go down to the defects down below, that's apparent also there. And we think that is probably also due to either the scope changing or the actual output that we're supposed to be working on changing, again, due to some unknowns that we didn't have from that new customer or that regulation. Regardless, we were pretty sure that by sprint 8, there will be a handful of developer resumes that are leaving the company looking for some other place to work.
Yeah. So I feel bad applauding that, but right? I don't want to applaud people getting burned out, but good job on the story. Right. And that's, I want to stress too, when you get to that opens up this wonderful question of like, oh, well, hold on. Like now from a coaching standpoint, we can ask, well, hold on, what do you mean it needed to get done? Why was it in there when you knew you couldn't do it? Well, it needed to get done. All right, well, it's still not getting done. So what would you like to do about it, right? We can open up all these extra conversations that become available when we hear the whole story. Was it Mark's group that was next?
I think next is Jason Nelson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hi, Team Neptune. We're pretty excited because we're part of a new ops fulfillment team, and we're getting new customers onboarded to our cloud infrastructure. So our organization, by the way, a little background, doesn't believe in DevOps. We're the ops side of things. So things get thrown over the fence to us quite a bit, but we've got a really strong team of talented engineers. And you can see that when you look at this cumulative flow diagram down below. We're really good at taking new requests and working them and getting them through. So we're getting a lot of praise for that. We're really smart. We're able to pivot. We love change. And if you look at the bottom chart, we started out really strong on our lead times for different changes. There you go. There's the histogram, right? So we were running about 4 to 6 days and doing really well. And then what happened is that when it came time to actually give the environment to the customers, we struggled a little bit. And it was taking customers longer to actually get access to their cloud environment. So, we tried to compensate for that by being really quick to respond to any issues. That's where you see the triage flow lane there. That's looking pretty healthy, and it always has, because that's our commitment to our customer. But we don't really spend a lot of time understanding our customers' needs. So when we do deliver, there tend to be some hurdles, right? And so our lead times are getting longer. You're seeing that on the bottom. And now, curiously enough, we also see that our backlog is starting to grow because the product people are hearing from our customer in place of us, and they've decided that there's some added technical debt that we need to take care of. So we could probably benefit from pausing, doing some retros, doing some cleanup. We don't do sprints, but cleanup iterations, and really focusing on the quality of what we're doing and trying to automate as much as possible so that when it gets to customer handoff, it's really seamless. Yeah, I think that's about it. And yeah, any questions? Did I miss anything, team?
No, nice job, Jason.
Thanks. Woo. We're new to Kanban too. Did I mention that? I'm new to Kanban. So.
Awesome. That's why. Oh, that's why the company doesn't believe in DevOps yet. Nice.
Unicorns are DevOps. They don't exist. Mark Bittner is next.
Okay. So I was on a team with Nisha and Noel, and we were Team Mars. And so you can see from our metrics here, our top metric, we're a very mature team. We've been through the forming, storming, norming, and we're now at the performing state. Very consistent in our throughput. Our plan versus actuals are pretty dead on. And as a result, the business has been able to make good projections, and there's good trust between the business and engineering. They're almost so perfect that there's suspicion from leadership that we may be gaming the system a little bit, which leads us to our burn down charts, which are the best burn down charts that we have ever seen in our lives, which again causes some suspicion that there may be some sandbagging or some gaming of the system. But as you can see, as we've matured, we've been very consistent, with the exception of maybe sprint 3, where there may have been a little bit of scope creep, but we were able to burn it back down by the end of the sprint. As we move down to releases to production, we, as a mature Agile team, always strive to increase our releases to production so that we have fast learning cycles. So even though we started out with 2 releases and had a dip to 1, we've started to ramp back up to more releases, which is what we want as a mature team, so that we're delivering value to the customer. And then finally, escape defects. This is the one that may be a little bit disturbing. Hopefully you would see a declining rate of defects because of the quality initiatives that we've undertaken have helped us catch bugs before they escape into production. But you can see here, we're kind of all over the place, from 5 to 7 to, dipping, and we don't really have a consistent trend here. So maybe if we do have one focus or one takeaway, it's that we need to focus on our quality practices. That's it.
So, Mark, what was your role in your team?
I was the evil manager.
Okay, so you suspect that they were gaming the system, they were gaming the numbers. That's your suspicion.
Yeah, Anisha had pointed out that these looked too good to be true, and that maybe the team, in order to make sure that their metrics always look good, had gamed the system a little bit. But who knows?
I tend to agree with you, but as a manager, was that your first thought? Or did you think everything was great?
I'll defer to Anisha on that one. The burn downs do look too good to be true. I must admit, I thought that myself.
Yep.
Yeah. I have to admit, I've only seen burn downs like that when people are like, okay, well, how many points do we have to burn down today? Yeah, they're it'd be great. And that's not completely true. I've occasionally seen a team that has a sprint that looks like that. I've even been on teams that have sprints that look like that. But it's usually not everyone
Yeah. So Daniel, just
Right.
want to do a time check. We've got about 4 minutes.
Yeah. So was there anyone else who was already queued up that
Yeah,
wants to do one
Josh
real quick,
Lindsay.
or do we want to wrap it there?
Yeah, Josh Lindsay and then Per. There's 2 more. Whatever you feel there's time for.
Yeah. So we'll tell you what. Well, at least do the one, and then if you two don't have constraints, we can always stay on, and right, people can kind of wrap. I don't know. Did you have stuff that you needed to wrap up before the end of the? Do you have specific things that you need to address before the end of the session?
No, I'm happy to extend it if other people would like to stay on. That's okay to open the time box a little bit, extend it a bit.
Okay. And were there any questions that queued up to you that people
Nothing
might?
really came in, no.
Okay, then great. Let's let the next 2 people go, and everyone can stay who wants to. And if you don't, thank you very much for joining. I understand it's getting later in the evening. So.
Okay, Josh Lindsay, did you already go?
No. So.
Okay.
Okay, so we are Team Saturn, and right now we're currently working on a funded research project through federal agency, and they need. And in order to meet our grant timeline, we need to be done by Sprint 4. So we managed to get through Sprint 3 pretty easily. We managed to also get through Sprint 4 with our current set of engineers. However, the PhD student that's managing all of, or that's like supervising all of this, manages to get more grant money. Now that means that we're going to have to put on more work because we need to collect more data. Then we also need to have our data scientists process more stuff. So in order to actually continue to, so in order to like take all of the stuff that we finished at Sprint 4 and then write up a manuscript so we can be done by Sprint 6, we also have to include any sort of extra engineering work from Sprint 5 and Sprint 6, so that way we can all combine this into one manuscript and not have to do multiple, and then I guess be done. So because most of the people that are working on this project have other research responsibilities, right, or they have to go to school, it means that a lot of the the amount of finished work is stagnant because we can't really change our schedules that much, but the amount of unfinished work continues up because even though we get more grant money, that also means that we have more specifications from the agency. So that means that we have to either work faster and create more escape defects and just write worse code, and push back a lot of testing, or we have to cut some things down. So that's basically the essence of sort of how our team went. And I'm drawing a lot from personal experience because I've had this happen, I think, twice, where we have where we have timeline for our manuscript, get some more grant money so we can possibly do more stuff, but that conflicts with the amount of time that we can get it reviewed. So we kind of have to so we just have a lot of unfinished work essentially. So then we would have to break it up into multiple pieces. So
thank you. That was a very different story from the last one on there, right? It kind of shows how the details can be radically different. So thank you.
Yeah, so Per is the last person. Do you feel like we have time?
I'm okay to stay on for another person.
Let's see if he's still with us.
Drop.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
Yeah, it's Per. We were Team Venus. And we're a team of senior developers and testers. And we had multiple issues come up. First of all, our company insists on having a release every other sprint. That's fine. We know, we plan for that. We address that. But we had a new PO come on board this time around, and that's where, if you look at sprint 3, we only believed that we could get about, a little over 20 points done. But there was an insistence that, they'll get the details cleared up and they'll get the stories finished, and the team will be able to do them anyhow. And there's no reason we can't do it, because we've got to have it done by the end of next sprint. So we dived in, we took on what we knew we could do, or we took on a whole lot more than we knew we could do, but we had faith in that the PO would get us what we needed. Unfortunately, about halfway through the sprint, there were server issues. So we lost a day due to the issues that we had. And then a couple days later, the PO got sick and was not able to finish up all the stories. And so sprint 3 kind of went out the window. Fortunately, like I said, we're, some good dedicated team. And sprint 4, we recovered. We took on what we didn't finish before. We added a little to it, and we were able to push it out the door. Bit of a death march, but we got it done. But then again, in sprint 5, once again, we ran into an issue with the stories not being complete, but they had to be done. And the only thing that didn't happen this time is the PO didn't get sick and we didn't have any server issues. But sprint 5 was just defeating. And so once again, we took the carryover, we added to it so that we could, take care of the client, and everybody piled in and piled on and really just roughed it out.
Oh, they need some time off. I felt tired after that story.
That whole team, absolutely. So
You
Daniel,
talk about hero complex.
possibly. So Daniel, from your perspective as an Agile coach, what kind of questions would you want to be talking to with these teams to be able to elicit the information so that those that are looking at these and maybe interpreting these metrics or these charts and maybe in an inaccurate way, they're making a story for themselves. How do you make that connection between the team to those that are looking at these and maybe misinterpreting this information to create that story so that there's understanding? How do you create that transparency?
Yeah, so that probably kicks up a great way to wrap this is, right, there's a story behind any metrics, but whether you have the right story, right? We saw how the same sets of metrics, the same sets of data could lead to many different stories that we created. So the important thing is always go back to the team, ask them what their story is, be inquisitive about the stories. And then, I give you a set of sample data here. So we have to tell stories based on the data that's available. And sometimes that's the situation you're in, right? You have some data and probe into it, ask what the stories are behind it. But one of the things that may lead you to is that there may be data that's not there that is actually the information that you want, that is actually the important thing. And so you might need to start, tracking new metrics that are more focused on what you want, what you want to learn and what's important. Actually, Sherry sent me a podcast over the weekend that I listened to, I really liked, and the people on it were advocating for, there's all this data around output that people focus on so much, but then they don't focus on metrics around value. So they were making a push for, hey, maybe a little less focus on busyness metrics and a little more focus on, on value metrics. And, again, back to what's the story you're trying to tell? What's the important story? Are you trying to tell how busy we are? Or are you trying to see how well we're serving our customers, right? It may guide us towards certain sets of metrics.
Yeah. So Daniel, since this discussion was about growth, how do we create that growth? So what I'm hearing is that we really need to be going to our teams to really get the information and listen, ask questions and listen. But how do we grow our teams from the information that we hear from our teams?
Yeah, well, I feel like you answered it. Listen, and so there's two. I think there's two steps to that. One, we can start prompting our teams we can ask our teams stories, but we can also encourage them just to start telling stories. Look for their own stories in it, right? So when we go to a retrospective, do we just go on like what's in the back of my head at the moment? Do I take the time to look at the data and see what stories that tells us? Does what I'm feeling prompt me as a team member to start measuring different data? Yeah, there's a comment here about data informed, not data driven, right? So yeah, we use the data to explore. We use the data to get to the important stories, and that's where then, as a coach, you could start asking powerful questions, and you can get them to look at it from different angles, and you can use structures like 5-stage retrospective to really get that conversation to draw you to an improvement action, that kind of thing, right? But the more they tell their own stories, the more it's going to feel personal, and they're going to feel motivated to actually take on that improvement instead.
So how do you create that psychological safety so that they feel open to share those things? Because maybe some cultures, especially if it's a new company that doesn't know how to work in this way, it might be really scary to share, like, we hit these roadblocks, we have these pain points.
Yeah. Man, what's a concise answer to that? Here, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment. Yeah. So I think maybe first thing to call out is there psychological safety to have it? So if you start poking at data and they start going, it's fine, maybe they don't feel quite comfortable with it. I want to. The challenge in that question is that you don't create psychological safety, you create psychological unsafety, right? Or psychological danger. I don't know what the right way to put that is. Hey, thank you. I know people have to drop off. I appreciate it. So to go to your question, Sherry, if you're seeing signs that people don't feel safe, the hard question that you have to ask yourself as a leader is, what are we doing that's making them not feel safe, right? It's all based, trying to, like, how do you just take a small piece of this question, right? But it's all about, right? People's beliefs are informed by their experiences, and if they don't feel safe, if they don't believe they're safe, it's because they have experiences not being safe. So you got to dig into that, and sometimes you can create new experiences. Share some of your own data that puts you in a vulnerable position. Hey, I'm responsible for increase in sales, and we didn't make it last month. I want to talk about why, and I want to show that it's okay to say that we didn't do what we thought we were going to do, and it's more important to learn from it than it is, to pick on or blame. So put yourself in a vulnerable position, right? Start creating those new experiences with safety. The other thing, right? Just for anyone who's practicing Scrum, it should be a little bit of an obvious thing. Part of the point of the retrospective is it's quiet, right? What happens in the retrospective stays in the retrospective. So, making sure that happens. And I know a lot of companies like, well, put your retrospective notes on SharePoint. No, don't put your retrospective notes on SharePoint. Obviously there are cases where, hey, everyone feels so safe that we can do that. That is wonderful, right? If you're that 0.2% of companies out there that have that level of psychological safety, fantastic. But way more than that percentage of companies put their notes on SharePoint. So, statistically, you're probably not one of those. Retrospective, it's supposed to be for the team. Let it be for the team. Stop trying to dig into it.
Well, thank you, Daniel. Where can folks reach out to you if there's any other continued conversation, if they have any other questions that they'd like to ask you or with this community to continue this conversation?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm on the Agile Denver thing. I'll share real quick the screen that has my contact info on, right? So daniel.lynn@agile42.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think I have Twitter and Facebook, but I have to admit I never look at them. And I'm too old for Instagram. I don't really, or I'm sure there are others too that people have moved on to, but I don't know what they are. So, yeah.
All right.
So yeah, reach out to me at my email. You can reach out to it's agile42.com also, and happy to chat with anyone about whatever. Yeah, I love this stuff. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing your evening with us and sharing your knowledge and your experience around meaningful metrics. I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone here in the community enjoyed it as well. And thank you.
thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Everybody.